Have you ever had something fall apart that you were really counting on? It might not be in a dramatic way, or it might not be a crisis that others around you even notice. It may not even have a clear before and after distinction, but it is still something that affects how you see your life. Today, I want to talk about this particular type of grief that comes from things not working out the way you hoped. And mom, I know you've sat with so many people through moments like this.
Yes, it is such a common occurrence, and it really happens to most all of us at some point in life that maybe what you envisioned one way just does not work out that way. Things fall apart that you thought were going to be this type of picture, but now it looks like this. And this can happen in everything from relationships breaking apart or job losses or health diagnoses. These are difficult moments in life where it really impacts the way you pictured that things were going to go. And so now you're into the realization that things are going to look different now. And it can bring about such tremendous feelings of loss and grief. And so I think these things are so important for us to talk about.
I like the fact that you're calling it what it is, a grief and a loss, because I think part of the issue is we don't think of these things as in the same way as maybe losing a loved one or that loss that is clearly defined as a grief. And so it kind of makes it hurt even more that we don't have the words for this. So what you're saying is that we should go ahead and say, yes, this is a grief, the fact that things aren't turning out the way I expected.
Yes, it's so important, I think, to label this as such. These are losses.
Hmm.
I spoke to someone not long ago who was really experiencing a loss of place. I mean, she had grown up in a particular community, that she had a home in that community, and finances were now such that she was no longer going to be able to live there. And so even just these things that feel like part of our daily life, where we live, these are things of loss. And so I think it's so appropriate to go ahead and name it as such, because it will entail feelings of grief. If we can go ahead and name it as such, it really does allow us to do the work of grieving what was, what used to be, what we envisioned, and to now work through such that we can better accept the reality and work with the new situation that we find ourselves in.
Totally. And what you described about the person you talked to who was not going to live in the place that they grew up, that is an example of something that's kind of integral to our identity. And these situations and these losses are very wrapped up in our personhood, and of course can feel very shattering if they are to fall away. And yet at the same time, our society doesn't have the same structures set up in place for us to mourn these kinds of losses. In the same way that if we were to lose a loved one, there would be a funeral and that expected period of grief. And so I think that can leave people feeling kind of confused about why they feel so sad. And also, I think it might be easy for people to minimize how you're feeling. Like, well, at least it worked out. At least you have somewhere to live. Or, everything happens for a reason. And those kinds of phrases can really discount the pain that you're experiencing. Or maybe you'll apply it to yourself and say, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way. It's not that big of a deal. But it can be life changing. And so I think it's like you were saying, mom, so important to acknowledge that it's happening so that you can then begin to work through it.
I think that's so right. Exactly what you're saying, that society often doesn't look at these things and name these things as real losses, but they are so crucial to our everyday life that the ability to name it as a loss, even things from, this is the way I saw my career trajectory going, and now it's going to be different. That job did not work out, or that business did not work out, or this was a friendship that, I thought we were, going to be best friends and grow old, sipping our coffee together on our porch. And now that friendship has drifted away. These all are things that are very much losses. And so if we can name it as such, there won't be, rituals that people aren't going to bring casseroles for these types of losses. But if we ourselves can say, what I'm experiencing is loss, and I feel grief over this. And I can now go through the process of grief to come out to something different here.
I know a personal example for me was several years ago. I was starting college, coming out of high school, and I had hope and expectation for this particular school I was going to go to. It was pretty far from my parents and from where I had grown up, and it felt like I was stepping out on my own, ready to be independent. And but when I got there, the reality just was so different from that. The place ended up not being a good fit. And I had a really hard time admitting that. And I just kept sticking it out. And so when it finally came to the point where I needed to move back closer to home and ended up going to a more regional school, at first it was just such a disappointment. It was a feeling of embarrassment, of grief, not just for the school itself, but for the person that I thought I was becoming by going to that school. It felt like a loss of independence, and like this turning towards adulthood that I thought I was taking was suddenly being taken away from me. And so it really resonates what you're saying, Mom, about like having to let go of the story of yourself that you had in your mind.
That's right. And I think that being able to name that as, this was the story, this was the way I had pictured it, and to grapple with the fact that now there is loss. If we don't allow ourselves to grieve over what our real loss is, we end up staying pretty stuck about that, and continuing to look to what could have been and what should have been and what I thought was going to be. But if we allow ourselves to really move through these feelings of grief, what that can do is open up and allow us to move to a new space within ourselves. So allowing us to feel those feelings really does get us to a place where we can now enjoy and take in pieces of newness that we would not be able to take in if we were staying stuck over here.
Something I've realized is that things can feel painful in the moment and then later become meaningful. And so we shouldn't expect that meaning to come out right away while we're feeling our hard feelings in the moment. There is that waiting period where we are just not sure what's going to happen.
Yes. And that uncertainty, that kind of messy middle, that can feel so distressing to us. We humans crave certainty. And so it could be like,
Yeah.
well, before I was certain this was going to be the picture,
Yeah.
I was certain it was going to go this way. And so living in that space of not knowing, and now this is not certain, that messy middle can be very disconcerting, and can be very hard to kind of walk through. But again, if we are able to kind of sit with those feelings for a bit and even just naming it, I think that might be helpful as well, to say, yes, things feel unsettled, allows us to sit with it, for the time it takes to, like you said, get to something that, looking back, you're like, oh, well, that was a wonderfully meaningful time. And it did turn into some new things I had not even expected. But you're right. It does not happen immediately. It does take time, and it does take kind of allowing ourselves that time to feel the feelings, knowing that these feelings won't last forever. We will eventually get to a different place with this situation.
In this messy middle, something that is important to note and something that I found out myself is the importance of taking care of yourself, of honestly kind of narrowing down to your basic needs and what you need to do to take care of yourself physically and mentally, making sure you're eating and getting enough sleep and getting time outdoors. and that you're not being so hard on yourself. If you can try to treat yourself as you would treat a friend who is going through a loss, try to treat yourself that way, and know that this is a time of healing. As new things are forming, you also need to take time to heal and focus on how you are feeling in the moment and in the messiness.
That is so true. And then I think another thing it's important to note is in this period of dealing with the loss of what has happened, it's so good and so important to connect with others during this time. And that may take going ahead and being honest and saying to people close to you, I feel like I've experienced a real loss here. And I'm in this place where things don't feel certain. And so I could really use your support right now. It can be so helpful to get the support of others, to get the understanding of others, to have other people validate, oh my gosh, yes, of course, this feels very difficult right now. Of course, that feels like a
Mm-hmm.
loss. All of these pieces can be so helpful to moving us to a place where we are able to see newness emerge.
And so often we picture life as a straight line forward where our hopes and our expectations are a certain way and we expect to head in that direction. But we know that that's not reality, that life is going to have detours and twists and turns and what feels like backtracking that we could have never seen coming. So when things don't work out the way you hoped, go ahead and name that for what it is: grief. Because once we allow ourselves to feel that, then we can be ready for what new doors may open in the future. So, watchers, I'm wondering if you feel comfortable sharing, what is something that hasn't worked out the way that you hoped, and how has carrying that been for you? Thank you so much for watching. I love having these special conversations, and thank you for being here, Mom. My name is Michele. That's my mom, Ashley. Thank you for joining us for this Secular Sunday, and we will connect again soon.